Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Hey, this is good. I have a picture and I can really see what you look like.
Yeah, and this is season 4. And I was a runner. I'm 68, so
you're just a young thing, man. Look, I don't even have a beard.
I work with people that you would consider old up the road. So I do a lot of tech help.
I turned 82. I put out NorCal Running Review for 12 years, and he did Cal Track News for longer than that. And then I got married and had a kid, and I said, Bill, I can't do this anymore. You want to take over my subscribers, and I'm not going to charge you anything. You can just take it. You just have to make good on the subscriptions that I have. We had 3,000 people.
Today on the podcast, we're out on the West Coast with somebody who is maybe a name you don't recognize if you're from the other coast, but he's one of the most important and key figures in the development of the running world in the 70s. Names like Prefontaine and Shorter are always top of the list, but our guest today is one of the key figures who really changed the face of running through all his efforts, working with people, publishing results, forming the West Valley Track Club and NorCal Running News, one of the early publications, and influencing many, many lives and the sport on a giant scale. Welcome today, Jack Leydig.
Yo.
Jack, you were a runner in the early mid-60s. Let's talk your origin story as a runner. How did you get involved in running and sport?
My driver ed instructor at Hillsdale High School in San Mateo was also the track and cross country coach. And he was always trying to recruit new bodies from the people he taught in the car. And so he looked at me and says, Jack, you look skinny, like you could come out for the cross country team. I was a junior. I didn't run until I was a junior. And I didn't know what cross country was. I said, sure. So I went out for cross country. My first year, I ran a 2-mile, my first race in 11:23, which on the track. By the time I graduated, I had brought it down to 9:40, which is still an acceptable time. So that's how I got started.
That was 1963, your very first season?
1960 cross-country season, so it was the fall. And then our team set a national postal record, track and field news postal record in 1961. We ran 49:04, which broke Maricosta's record. Twice we broke it. And Danny Murphy was on their team. He was NC2A 10K champion one year. And then in the spring, we ran a 4-mile relay and broke the national record by 1 second, 17:49, which is like 4:27 a man. But we didn't have any competition. We just had one other team there because we had to have it legal to compete against something. And our last guy kicked in 4:25. If he hadn't kicked in, we wouldn't have had the record. So we had a coach. He was there 3 years, and we had 2 national records.
Wow. Not everybody's probably familiar with this. People out of the U.S. wouldn't be. The postal races. How'd you become aware of that?
Track and field news is just down the road from me, and they were in, I think, Los Altos at the time. And in cross country, you add up your 5 best times in the same race on the track and add them together, and that way you can compare across the country, because you can't really compare different courses in cross country. He had us run like 5 or 6 postal races that fall, and we ran 3 times and missed it, and then we ran 2 more, and we broke the record twice. And the guy that was on the runner-up team behind us was Walt Hewlett of Hewlett Packard. Yeah. And wow. He ran for Harvard. He's a really good friend of mine. He's still alive. And he actually was 5th in the NC2A cross country one year, but we ran against Palo Alto. And if it wasn't for them in the postal meet, we wouldn't have had a national record because they just sucked us right along.
Oh, nice. Okay. You then had a high school team with 4 runners under 4:30,
Yeah,
which is a pretty good thing.
but we didn't run that in a race. We ran it in a race, but we didn't run it in a relay.
Okay. When you were getting towards the end of high school, what were you thinking you were going to do with running after high school? What was the state of the world for you?
Well, I was trying to get a scholarship to college, and I tried to get into Stanford and Cal, but they didn't want to give me a scholarship. So our coach, he had actually graduated from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale and knew the coach there. So he managed to twist the coach's arm, and so I got a scholarship for your track and field scholarship there. And so that's what I did 4 years at Southern Illinois.
What was it like there? You were good high school runners. What was your transition to college like for mileage and training and academics, everything? What was that like for you?
The academics I expected. The training, actually, our coach there, he was a good coach, but our high school coach, I have to say, was top of the pile. You know, we get 2 national records in 3 years. Actually, we got it in a 6-month period. And when he was there, initially, the school mile record was like 5:08. And 3 years later, the record was 4:20. So
But what happened at Southern Illinois?
I ran like track races, steeplechase primarily. I ran third in the Central Collegiate meet, and Jack Batcher won it. It was like, I don't know, it was 100 degrees. It was terrible. So I didn't have a good time, but I got third. And then after I got out of college, I just went into road racing because I was better at longer distances.
All right, let's talk about that. Did you graduate from college in the late 60s, 68, 60? When did you graduate?
I had a master's degree there. So I didn't compete for 2 years there, but I competed, but not for the school.
What'd you major in?
Engineering.
All right, so you were a runner for quite a while by graduation.
Right.
What were you paying attention to as a fan? Were you in on still reading track and field news and following the Olympics and those guys?
Track and field news from 1960 on. And I know Bob Anderson, who is the Runner's World initiator. And he still lives in the Bay Area, lives like 20 miles from me. So we had a lot of running magazines in California, Track and Field News, Runner's World, and then we had the regional ones like mine.
When you came to finishing competing for the college,
Right.
and you're going to do road racing, what were you,
Okay.
who were the people you were looking at that later you would be working with for recruiting and things, and how that,
Right. Well,
what was your vision of yourself?
I didn't run for a club till I got out of college, or actually a year before I got out of college. And I thought I'll run for the club that wins this particular road race. And they won the road race, and I joined the club and became the president for 15 years and started the magazine and everything. So we became a national class where we finished behind Florida Track Club in the 1971 AAU cross country meet. And they beat us like by 12 points. Was all.
Wow. What was the track club that you joined?
West Valley Track Club. It's Southern Peninsula near San Jose. But we were spread all over Northern California.
You were president of that. The club existed, though, before you became involved.
It existed in 64. But there weren't many clubs around. We're actually the oldest club in Northern California now, besides the Olympic Club, which is really not a running.
What age were you became president? How'd that happen?
They just elected me. I was a good runner, and
you got to say yes.
So you want to be president, and nobody else wanted to be president for 15 years, and you know how that happens. Donald Trump wanted to do that.
All right, maybe we won't talk too much about that, but let's talk about the origin. What was the state road racing, women in road races? In those road races you were running right at the beginning. Right. Let's tell everybody what it was like when you entered the whole field. Yeah. Run fees, aid stations, women's participation, that kind of stuff. What was it like?
It was like the dark ages because the AAU didn't have had rules where women couldn't run. They ran anyway. We had the Dolphin South End Running Club in San Francisco, and Walt Stack, who was an old fart, he had all the women run, and he wouldn't get approval for any of the courses he ran. He just went out there and did it, like Nike, just do it. And so he went course, runs in the city through stoplights. And the women actually didn't qualify at Boston even until 1972. And the gal that won it just passed away recently, Nina Kizik. She had Alzheimer's, and she's from New York. And then the second place gal was Elaine Peterson, who was from the Bay Area. She joined West Valley. That was the first official Boston race for women. They had women run before, but Jock Semple pulled them out. $1. I put on a marathon, and it was $3, I think.
Let's talk about this NorCal running news then. How'd it get started? Why?
We needed a club newsletter, and so it started out as a club newsletter, but then I put results from other clubs and individuals also. Then one of the people in Sacramento said, why don't you just make it a regional magazine? So that's used to be a West Valley newsletter, and then it became NorCal Running Review. And then it used to be free. You'd pick it up at road races, and then we had subscriptions, and it was a once a month while I could stand it at 60 pages. No computers back then. I used a typewriter, Selectric, with no correcting ribbon.
After maybe 2-3, you were charging $3 a year once you got the subscription. What was that, the initial subscription price? Do you remember?
It was like, no, it was about right. That included mailing. Can't mail anything for that now.
Yeah. Okay. How'd this work? Who was doing it? Was there a team at all in the first issues?
For the mailing, we had a group, a club got together and put mailing labels on, but I kept up the address file on a computer at Stanford, where they had a large mainframe that I used, and no personal computers.
So it quickly got I know some of the early issues are 60 pages long, right? How long did it take?
It's been a week usually to put one out.
Is that a week, 4 hours after work for?
I didn't have a job. I just,
okay.
I did this for free, and I can't remember where I got the money from.
All right.
Back then, my rent was $70 a month for 8 years at the house I was staying in.
When you started, did you think this was going to be, I'll just do it till I don't do it?
Grew on itself, and then we sucked in more and more good athletes, not just distance runners. As a matter of fact, the American discus record is still held by an ex-West Valley guy, Ben Plucknett, who was out of Missouri, but he went to San Jose State, I think. And it's to 37 feet, which is still an American record. And that was in 1982, I think.
So you had a team and you're doing these newsletters. It gets to the point where you're taking subscription money. This thing lasted for 13 years, all through the 70s.
It was 69 through 81.
As you're putting this stuff in, you're learning names. Right. And what about the parallel with your bringing athletes to the track club? Right. And organizing your first race? I don't have the timeline of how all that works.
When I started doing the magazine, people said you need a good marathon because they didn't have many marathons back then. You had to go to Boston or Culver City or some other race that nobody had ever heard of. And so we put on a marathon in Burlingame and San Mateo. It was called the West Valley Marathon. And the first year that it was run, a guy from Colombia that joined the club, Alvaro Mejia, was just running great. He was like 10th in the 10K in Mexico City, but he lived in Bogota, which is 9,000 feet. So he was acclimatized. And I trained with him all the time. I said, Alvaro, you're in such a good shape, you can probably win Boston. So the club sent him back there and he won. He only won by 4 or 5 seconds over Pat McMahon, but he passed away, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. But so he brought his whole Colombian team up here to train for the 72 Olympics. So we had a lot of really good people.
What'd you do for facilities? A track club.
Uh,
You don't have campus. How'd you work? How'd you get?
we just ran together and got into high school, college tracks, and a lot of the college coaches were sympathetic with once you got out of college, you really couldn't do much back then, and they put on meets where they let the open athletes like us get in and run. The coaches were really instrumental in helping AAU running going at that point.
You talk about it very casually. I suspect you had to go knock on doors and talk to a lot of people. So, was there some hurdles where you saw the change when, okay, you're bringing women, you're bringing people of different ages, you're bringing race walkers. Yeah. You expanded the notion of what the sport of athletics, road racing, track and field was to open it up to a lot more people and not just elite athletes. I don't know if this is the same style you had then, this kind of gentle, easy talking. You probably had to move, if not mountains, some pretty big hills.
You need friends. If you have friends, they tell other friends, and pretty soon it becomes a movement.
Well, I think there's a lot of steps and struggles with that. Good for you. I noticed one name on your early staff. If you go through the credits at some of the early typo, Boitano, was that Mary Boitano's dad?
It was Marietta Boitano. She was 10 years old when she ran the national AAU marathon, and she ran almost 3 hours flat when she was 10 years old.
Uh-huh.
You can do that. 7-minute miles for a 10-year-old. Yeah, can you do that?
I saw that her dad was on. Was he part of the newsletter help group?
No, actually, he wasn't even on our club. Neither was Marietta. But we all hung out together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You sent a runner to Boston because you thought he could win. So how was the club finances? Became a pretty big club. How were the club finances handled there during the time you were president?
Because he made some money, and then we had club dues, but we didn't have tons and tons of money, so it was pretty tough. We sent him back, but airfare to Boston back then was a couple $100 maybe. But yeah, the fact that he won Boston and I had told him that he could win it, that was pretty amazing. Yeah.
What did he think when you said that?
He rolled his eyes.
Yeah.
And his eyes were rolling a different way.
What about the change then from women? It sounded like from the very beginning you were this is going to be inclusive. My newsletter, my club, the races, everything is going to be inclusive. When was that changing? It had to be a bit of a wall at the beginning of the 70s.
Yeah, I got married and had a kid in 1981, and then I said, I can't do all this anymore, train and put out a magazine and have a family and all this other stuff. I actually started my own business, Jack's Athletic Supply. I didn't do any computer stuff after 3 or 4 years because it just didn't interest me. I started selling T-shirts to races, and nobody else was doing that at that point in time. So I got in on the bottom floor.
That's the tagline of your involvement here. You were one of the first people to do all these things at the level you did them. And at that time, it really had an impact on the expansion of road racing. Trying to get a feel for people is during the decade of the 70s, let's say, were there some milestone changes when technology changed? Were the races you're putting on then, the timing, the aid stations, the city saying we're going to put security in? Did you face any of those at that time?
Yeah, aid stations were pretty much water in the 60s. And then the Gatorade came out in 68 at the Olympic trial marathons in Colorado. And I ran that race, and so did, 100 others. A lot of people dropped out, including me, because the Gatorade just really upset our stomach. And so Bill Gukin, who was a San Diego Track Club guy, he was a chemist, and he put together what they called ERG, I forget what they called it. It was like Gatorade, but it didn't upset your stomach so much. And so that became the aid station drink through the 70s. And it was all because Gatorade is still used to pour over coaches at basketball games, but I don't think it's a good electrolyte.
That's great. Let's talk about your training for the road races. You didn't talk about the skill and your assessment of your college coach in too much detail. When you started, then you're running road races by the time you left college a lot. Were you coached, and what was your mileage and stuff?
I tried to get 90 to 100 miles a week, and I trained with the Colombian guy quite a bit. But most of my training was solo. If I was doing intervals, I'd go to the track and do it solo and time myself. And I put a lot of mileage in it. 90 to 100 miles is pretty decent even nowadays. Do double workouts, and Mejia would sometimes do workout 3 times a day. I didn't do that.
What about the people, some other figures that passed through the track club that were standouts, either in personality or ability?
We had a lot of the Stanford guys join the club. Don Cardone, who was 4th in the Olympic marathon in 76. And he actually ran his first marathon at the one that our club put on. The night before, he ran a 8:34 2-mile indoors in Oakland against Gaston Rollins. He finished like a second behind him. And I said, Don, you ought to come and run our marathon in the morning. Just do it as a workout. He rolled his eyes. And then the next morning, he showed up along with Duncan McDonald, who's a 4-minute miler. And they ran 1-2 at the marathon. He ran it like a 2:18, just cruising through it. And then he was going to run the trials for the 72 Olympics, but he got mononucleosis, I think, in the spring. But then he came back in 76 and made the team. Duncan McDonald, we had a whole string of people. And the discus thrower, we had a triple jumper at 55 feet, which is still a very good jump.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of sprinters. The Bay Area Striders had a lot of sprinters. We had a few. And then the club, once I got out of the scene, it faded out for about 10 years, and now it's mostly a masters group. So we've won the masters cross country, I don't know, 4 or 5 years in a row in the 40 plus and 50 plus, or first or second. Oh, and then the Christmas Relays was another race that I put together in 73. It started in Half Moon Bay on the coast and ran down to Santa Cruz, which was 50 miles. And I think we ran 6 years there, and then the CHP was going to shut it down because it was so dangerous. So people with Christmas trees on their cars and 1,700 runners on the coast highway, which is 2 lanes wide.
And CHP, that's the California Highway Patrol, so that's the state police.
Yeah, we got to a point where they didn't shut us down, but it was looking like we better move this race because somebody's going to get killed. And we moved it to Lake Merced in San Francisco. And we just had our 50th annual last year. I'm not involved with it anymore. I was 26 years, I was meet director. So.
Yeah. What do you think about your contribution and activities over these? Other people will speak for you and say that you're one of the good guys. You influenced a lot of people and you're just positive and inclusive. So I'll lather it on. I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of your friends and people. But what do you think? What are the impacts and surprises that you had that you said, wow, this is actually something really good that's happening that you're really involved with?
I didn't really think of it as like I was a leader, but I didn't really try to be a leader. But then in the late 70s, when I started my company, Jack's Athletic Supply, I realized I knew all these coaches, I knew all the race directors, and that was my customer base. And I just quit my job, my one-person job, last year after 48 years. But yeah, all this, I did it for free, but it fed into my lifetime job.
Let's talk about the change then in stuff like shoe technology that you saw before you opened the business that was happening in the 70s. And what were your early shoes and how important were getting shoes and what was available?
Actually, I worked for Runner's World for probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And they had a sporting goods shop, Starting Line Sports, which I sold their shoes and athletic equipment. That's how I got my background selling running equipment. The only thing I remember is at the Olympic trials in '72, where I ran the marathon. I got a pair of Nike shoes just as they came out as a company. And you never want to run in a new pair of shoes in a marathon.
Well, a lot of people did that day. They'd be handing them out. Everybody at the trials got that pair of shoes, I think.
I think so, yeah.
What were some milestone changes then that you saw in your business then, starting in the 80s? What were the changes? And the running boom, the big participation thing, when were the leaps and bounds?
It was kind of just gradual after a shorter one, but in the Bay Area and like in New York and a few other localities, LA area, San Diego, the running boom started before Shorter won the marathon. But it just grew, and they told friends, and their friends told other friends, and it became a movement. You didn't have to try. We had races with 100 runners, and that was a lot of runners. Now they're turning away tens of thousands of runners at Boston and New York every year. You got a lottery system, and that didn't happen all at once.
We can talk about how those changes maybe have more than one way to look at them. What do you think about the growth of road racing, where some casual runners they've got a 20-minute walk before they get to the line after the gun? What do you think about this having that kind of participation, but it's quite a different experience?
Yeah, back then everybody was a competitor. You had people that were back of the pack that ran 8-minute miles. Walt Stack was 60 years old, and you could wind him up and he'd run 8-minute miles forever. They went out there to run and compete. And nowadays, a lot of the races don't have the depth. They have the numbers, but they don't have the depth. It's starting to come back, and the high school runners are running really great. But you have to see somebody else do it and say, hey, I can do that too.
When did you personally off-ramp from the 80, 90-mile weeks and do less competing? Was that when you started your business? When did that happen?
Just start taking more and more hours. I'd drop down to 30 to 40 miles a week, but they were hard miles, and I was still running well. But it wasn't any 90 to 100-mile weeks was a daydream. I couldn't have time for that.
Is there a memorable race that you think this is the one that either taught me something or I'll never forget, or a couple that stand out?
Yeah, a couple that I got lost.
Just like the recent half marathon championship. Yeah. How'd that happen?
I was leading with a pack of about 4 or 5, and the guy on the course says, turn right. So we turned right. And then 100 yards later, we were in this cul-de-sac, and we thought, this is not right. So we took a look on our left shoulder, and there was the main pack going across this field. So I wound up getting second by 1 second, but it took me like 4 miles to catch him.
Yeah. Wow.
And Boston was probably my best race in '72, because I tried to qualify at the West Valley Marathon, but I was a race director, so I was no sleep 2 nights in a row. And so I wound up going on pace for about a 2:30, which was the qualifying time.
Right.
Then at 20 miles, I just hit a wall. And so then I had to run Boston, because that was really the last good race. And I had to run under 2:30. So I ran at 2:25, which was still my PR.
Yeah. How often did you run races?
Yeah.
How many different races did you put on in a year at the peak?
I don't know, maybe a half a dozen. Club put on a lot of races. And we had track meets we put on too, but I didn't do that. A lot of the other guys in the club pitched in, and you round up officials, and it's a whole different set of tools you got to do that.
The impression and what people say is you made it available to everybody, and that's what the impression is. Your role in the sport is making it inclusive and available, inviting, and that it really increased participation. Don Cardone, you mentioned, and you did try to bring in some high talent
Oh, yeah.
and have some key races. So I know you have a Prefontaine story. We tried to get him to come. What happened there?
We tried to, for the 74 EU cross country championships the club put on.
Oh,
We were trying to get Shorter and Pre to go head to head because they'd never done it in cross country. And Shorter came, and Pre said he wasn't up to. Shorter finished like 10th or 11th, so Pre would have probably trounced him. But Pre didn't come down. But that was the only time that then I really tried to get Prefontaine to come to. Yeah, he only goes to the great races.
but and again, it's just casually said, "Oh yeah, the '74 national championships." What was involved in becoming the host of that, for example?
The AAU meeting, they have them once a year, and then they assign. They say, "I want to put on this race," and then they have votes to see if you're qualified. And West Valley was always putting on races, so we qualified to put on the nationals. And a lot of clubs just didn't have the expertise of the people to do it. So,
Well, I'm curious about how these things go. Was there anybody competing against you, or when you guys announced that they're like, "Okay, you got it"? How'd that work?
I don't even remember.
Oh, okay. Once you get awarded it, do you
Yeah.
say, "Oh, great," or do you say, "Oh no"?
We had to go out and measure the course. We steel taped it and then we used a wheel as well. And we double, triple checked it. And we had to get all the facilities and transportation. And we had 300 people there, which is really high for a national cross country. Yeah.
And where was that? Was that the Belmont course?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about what that place was like before you became involved? Because it raised to quite a high status.
Yeah. Person Belmont was there probably in the mid 60s. The high schools and the colleges ran, but it was just a crummy course. And then Bob Rush, who actually passed away a couple months ago, he was the coach at College of San Mateo. And he actually put the course together the way it was because the Interstate 280 now is actually west of the course, but it used to be right over where the course was before they built the interstate. And then he helped actually figure out where the 10K was going to be because they didn't have a 10K course up there. And he said, "Jack, you and this guy named John Sheehan, who was another club member, he says, you guys can go out and measure it." So we had to do all kinds of changes and stuff to make sure we got it just right. And still have a film. You want to see it?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to watch it right now. Yeah, actually, it would be great if maybe we can get somebody to.
It doesn't show the whole thing, but it does show Nano winning it. And
Is there any chance we get somebody to upload that to a YouTube file?
I really don't know how to upload a movie like that, but you do.
We can probably get somebody to
Yeah.
bring. Yeah, you get a little DVD player, you plug it into a computer, and
Bob Rush, I think, took the movie. It was like 4 or 5 minutes long, and it shows the start and it shows Shorter finishing in 10th or 11th. And that was his first loss in 5 nationals.
yeah. Oh, that would be spectacular. These guys I told you about that Zoom call on Fridays, Craig Elias, you know the Elias twins.
Yeah, right.
They had a 8mm film their dad made of the 1962 USA Russia meet.
I have one of those too on the track at Stanford.
Yeah, from 62?
Yeah, 762, I think.
Well,
But it was at Stanford. It was versus Russia.
and the Brumel, the high jump, 7-foot high jump is on there, and the sand, I think there were sawdust pits.
Oh yeah.
Did you attend any of those?
I went to school at Southern Illinois, so most of the track meets on the West Coast I couldn't get to. It was all Midwest or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be great. Maybe we can find somebody who could either copy the DVD and then take
I don't know what you can. It's not. It's an MP4, I think.
that. We can just email.
That large.
I can credit you and put it on YouTube. People would love to see it
Yeah.
if you're okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that great, but if you were there, it's that great. There's 300 people and
Oh yeah. The Elias, same thing. It's the video is
3,000.
their dad handheld and it's not very shaky. It's one of the best videos. There aren't that many of them. It'd be great to share with the community. They love it.
52 years old. Oh, those shoes behind those Nike waffle racers.
Yeah.
I remember those. Kenny Moore, before they came out with the waffle shoe, he was in San Diego, and he says Oregon Track Club is going to wipe you guys out. They finished fourth down there, and we finished second. And they have these waffles, and they said Bowerman made these waffle shoes, and we're going to just beat the crap out of you. No.
Yeah, shoes help, but they're not all just miracles. Yeah, those are for me, those are like 1976. We had a golf course, cross-country course at college. Yeah. Are you a fan today? Do you stay up with track and field now?
This big meet I went to, I think, was the Prefontaine meet when they had it down here at Stanford because they were rebuilding the Eugene Stadium. And Tom Jordan, who's a good friend of mine, he's the meet director, he says, Jack, can you take care of people coming into the hotel? It's a half mile from me. I said, sure, I'll give you a free ticket to the meet. Thanks, Tom.
There's probably no way to estimate how many hours you put in for the sport. And I don't know, you're disarming. You talk about it so casually. You have to realize the giant impact you've had and the kind of echelon.
Shorter, but I'm not quite as good.
Yeah. But the impact, the number of people that actually have met you, the number of people who, credit you with encouraging them to be a part of sport. And there are a lot of people who will say that they got into the sport or they continued the sport because of your encouragement. And you said you're not necessarily a reluctant leader, but somebody who wasn't in it okay, I'm a leader. What can I go do?
Yeah, I'm not like Tom Jordan. Tom Jordan, that was his business, putting on the Prefontaine meet. But he made a lot of money doing it. I never made a penny putting on meet. So I just like doing it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
It's for people like you that help the sport grow. And, really a lot of people appreciate what people like you have done. Just do it. If you talk to Phil Knight, I'd love to talk to him too. I didn't do this podcast to track down people who have done 10,000 interviews. I did it to find people who were part of it.
Yeah.
I found a guy where I grew up in Pennsylvania that's still doing popsicle stick timing.
Yeah.
Timing, and he charges $50. And when he goes out of business, these races are going to die.
Yeah.
Because they won't be able to get cheap timing.
Chronomics timers, who Bob Rush actually was the inventor of that. He didn't make the machine, but Texas down in Sunnyvale is also, they're a local company. They made clocks, timers, which I sold. I took one into the USSR for the 80 Olympics and I got it through the airport.
You did it?
Yeah, it was an 8-lane timer. I got it through the airport at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow. And they opened it up and there's batteries and wires and shit. So this is not going to be good. And then when we went to the stadium, we had in-tourist people with us, thank goodness, because they spoke Russian and I didn't. And they helped us get in because the guards at the Linden Stadium, they opened up the top, all these freaking wires and batteries. This is not good.
How did you get involved with providing that for the 80 Olympics?
I had a customer in Paris who bought the Chronomic stuff and he wanted to see the new timer. I said, I'll bring it on over. I just carry on luggage. It's like a briefcase. And once we got through the guard at the gate, we went through the same guy each day, so it was a little easier.
Have you traveled around the world for other stuff involved with the sport?
I went to Montreal, Moscow, and LA are the only 3 Olympic Games I've been to. It's a lot of work, and the TV coverage is better.
Yeah.
You can find it.
Hey, blink and you miss it. I went to the Sydney Games and I managed to finagle a press pass. So it was nice to be on the finish line and center court for everything, but you blink and you miss something.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of traveling in the last 10 years, but it was traveling to travel, not to see track meets and such. I went to Australia and New Zealand, and it was a whole month. And it was great.
Do you make connections with runners when you travel personally, though?
I'm trying to think. I do have a gal in Russia who I'm good friends with. We used to talk back and forth on WhatsApp, but we can't do that anymore because Russia's cut off the communication. Although she was in Switzerland last week and she called me. She says, your emails are actually coming through in my spam folder. I talked to her. She was a tour guide 5-6 years ago when we went on the Baltic Sea tour. And we were in St. Petersburg, and she speaks perfect English, and she lives in Rostov, which is like an hour drive from Ukraine. So she says it's crap. She can't fly out of Rostov because all the airports are shut down, and she has to take a train to get to Moscow because it's right along the Ukrainian border, pretty much.
Yeah.
But that's what I do now. I meet people, but most of them, they just not like her. She was special, and she kept in touch with me. We go back and forth once or twice every month or two.
Also, the NorCal running newsletters are all online. I think you can get every single episode. When I publish this, I'll put the link if people want to see what it looked like and the evolution.
LA84 Foundation, I think. If you go to westvalleytc.com and then the opening page, there's a history, and you click on that and it shows all the covers, and you just click on the cover and you can bring up that issue. So Vicki Hansen was the gal that was responsible for that. She said, I know Wayne Wilson, who was the vice president of the LA84 Foundation, and they offered to scan all of them and put them online for nothing. And I said, they don't even have a bookstore anymore, a building. They just, everything is all online, but we're in there, which is great because running history is kind of non-existent.
We've got basically all those issues for 12 years. It is interesting to look at the names that pass through and the details. Some of them were, 50, 60 pages long.
Yeah. Yeah, the magazine, when I did it on a selector typewriter, but they were 12 by 15 pages. And then I shot them down 70% to make them 8.5 by 11. So I was really typing twice the size of a page. There were 60 pages, but really it was like 120 pages. It was my worst grade in high school.
I just want to get one more insight into, because this is all casual, and like you said, you were in the middle of it, so it didn't seem earth-changing. And at the time, what were you like as a competitor? What was your competitive drive when you were training?
Kill.
Yeah. What about when you had to let that go and you stepped down? We all go through these transitions of, you're a good high school runner, you managed to get a college scholarship, you ran there, your time went down, you got some podium things, and road racing becomes good, and then life changes. How did you handle that transition away from, I'm not killing anymore?
Yeah, I'm dying. Yeah. No, I think try to remember the good races.
Yeah.
The ones you get lost in, I can still remember those. Those are no fun.
I know people across your path will enjoy hearing your voice and a little bit of the reflection we did. Maybe it'll kick some people to go back and look at those issues. And anybody.
Cochran, Bill and Judy Cochran, they're a pair that are just like me because they put out California Track and Running News for longer than I did. So they know what it's like. I think they didn't get rich from it.
Yeah, it's the same as most of the runners of the era. Their money was starting to come in, but compared to what it is today, it wasn't an inviting thing to be an activity. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you about Frank Shorter's money under the table. You're going to cut it off?
No, we're going to talk about it.
No, he had me under the table. This was after he won in Munich too. I was in charge of bringing down Shorter and Jim Johnson and John Anderson to Bogota and Cali for track meets that Mejia was putting on down there. And the only thing that Shorter got was free airfare for he and his wife, but I don't remember that his wife went. And then 3,000 under the table, which that was a lot of bucks back in the early 70s. But I could tell you some other things, but I won't.
Okay, why not? You think it's disrespectful or should be kept confidential? Okay, but I've had plenty of people have talked about how the money passed to them.
This and he'll tell Frank.
All right, how is there any you can tell with leaving a name off and interesting payoffs? I've just published an interview with Steve Williams, a sprinter, and he's not shy at all about talking about it. I'm telling him, if you want me to run the 100, I want $3,000 more.
Yeah.
So it's not that it was hidden or unknown.
No,
it
just didn't have anything to do with money. This was more non-kosher type stuff that you wouldn't expect. Probably. Well, I don't know. So I'll just read all the NorCal Run reviews. That'll take you about a year at least.
Yeah, they're pretty dense. And they have a little bit of commentary on them. So they're not just, it's not just the stat sheets. There'll be a commentary that said, John Anderson considered his dominance of this season running. Well, it's good value stuff, and it's great that it's preserved. Maybe we can work on recovering some of that video stuff.
Tell you an original copy, all 82 issues. How much would you offer?
As long as it's preserved, I think it deserves to go in a museum. I don't get any money for doing this podcast either.
There's probably only 2 complete sets of NorCal Run reviews in the world.
That's pretty cool. I just interviewed, do you know Ron Wayne, Mizuno? Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I think I beat Ron once.
Yeah.
At Boston, I think I beat him by a minute.
It wasn't the one where he was top American. He did talk about how that was a life-changing race where he was top American. That really got him some great doors opened.
Yeah, Ron was a customer of mine. We worked for Mizuno and
Oh, if somebody asked you about what was the best part of being there in the 70s for running, what was it for you?
Just meeting all these people that I've been friends with forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Thanks for your time, Jack. My wife's first language is Ukrainian.
Oh, really? I have a guy that lives in Lviv who is Tom Smith. He was a 354 miler in the early 80s. He's a West Valley guy, and he can't use WhatsApp anymore, but we were going back and forth. So I have my Russian friend who lives in Rostov on the eastern side of the Ukraine, and then Tom lives in western Ukraine. So I have information on both sides of the war.
I was talking to Evgeny Artsenov, the second place 800.
The guy, Evgeny, is on my Facebook page.
Talking to him over the last couple of years, I send him videos of my nephews doing Ukrainian dancing and keep in touch.
I was living with Tom for a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, cool. What are you really going to do with your set of original things at one day? What happens?
Probably just bury it.
No, don't do that.
I can see your pulse going up 40 beats. Okay, here we go. You're in Canada. That means we have to put a tariff on this.
Oh, yeah.
The guy that lives right near you that I ran with at SIU, a guy named Dan, Canadian Records for 10K.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
Dan Shaughnessy.
And SIU in the 60s.
So the coach didn't like him, or he had bad grades. But I saw him about 10 years ago. I did a trip to New England and then drove through. He lives just north of Toronto, about an hour.
I'm right downtown. I moved here 20 years ago to get married.
I ate at the Tower. I took him out to dinner.
You can still see the tower from my house. They haven't blocked the view.
You see the tower from Niagara Falls, actually. I have a photo of it.
You can see the CN Tower from Niagara Falls?
It's not smoggy.
Huh.
You can.
Jack, thanks for everything you've done all the way through for the sport and your role in promoting running. And it really had a role in making what it is today. A lot of people say it would be different if you hadn't been involved. So thanks for everything you've done, and thanks for all your time today.
Arnold Schwarzenegger would say, I'll be back.
It's fun spending time with you, Jack. Thanks for everything.
Take care. Bye.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.